The distress signal had been playing for 3 days when the human cargo ship Wandering Hope finally picked it up. Captain Maria Santos leaned forward in her chair, her dark eyes fixed on the flickering screen that showed the source of the signal. It was coming from a small vessel drifting in the dead space between 2 star systems, far from any shipping lane or colony world. "That's a Vethkai ship," said her navigator, a young man named David Chen. His voice carried a note of surprise. "I've never actually seen one before, only in old database files." Maria had heard of the Vethkai, though she had never met one. Humanity had only been part of the Galactic Council for 15 years, and there was still so much they didn't know about the hundreds of species that made up the vast community of intelligent life. The Vethkai were one of the mysteries, a species that kept to themselves, rarely seen at trading stations or diplomatic gatherings. Some said they were dying out. Others said they had been forced to the edges of civilized space long ago. "Any other ships responding to the signal?" Maria asked. David checked his instruments and shook his head. "There are 3 other vessels within range, a Torvac merchant ship, a crystalline transport, and something I can't identify. None of them are changing course." Maria frowned. That was strange. The galactic community had strict rules about distress signals. Every species had agreed to help vessels in danger, no matter their origin. It was one of the fundamental laws that kept space travel safe for everyone. "Try hailing them," she said. "Ask why they're not responding." David sent out the communication request. A few moments later, the face of a Torvac appeared on their screen. The Torvac were a reptilian species with scales that shifted between green and blue depending on their mood. This one's scales were a dull gray, a sign of discomfort or fear. "Human vessel," the Torvac said. "We advise you to ignore that signal and continue on your way. That ship belongs to a Vethkai. No good can come from helping them." Maria felt her jaw tighten. "There's someone in trouble out there. We don't ignore distress signals." The Torvac's scales shifted to a darker shade. "You are new to the galaxy. There are things you do not understand. The Vethkai are cursed. They carry bad fortune wherever they go. Every species knows this. To help them is to invite disaster upon yourself." "That's superstition," Maria said flatly. "It is wisdom earned over thousands of years," the Torvac replied. "The Galactic Council itself has declared the Vethkai to be outside the protection of rescue laws. No one is required to help them. No one should help them. Turn your ship around, human. Let them face their fate as they are meant to." The communication ended. Maria sat in silence for a long moment, her crew watching her with uncertain eyes. There were 12 people on the Wandering Hope, and they had all heard what the Torvac said. The galactic community had been their guides and teachers since first contact. The older species had shown humanity how to navigate the stars, how to trade, how to survive in a universe far bigger and stranger than they had ever imagined. But this felt wrong. "David," Maria said slowly, "what do our own sensors tell us about that ship?" David turned back to his instruments. "Life signs are weak but present. One individual. The ship's power is failing. Based on the decay rate, I'd say they have maybe 6 hours before life support gives out completely." 6 hours. Someone was dying out there, and 3 ships full of intelligent beings were going to fly away and let it happen because of some ancient superstition. "Set a course for that ship," Maria said. Her first officer, a woman named Yuki Tanaka, stepped closer to her chair. "Captain, are you sure about this? We don't know anything about these Vethkai. If the entire galactic community has decided to abandon them, maybe there's a reason we don't understand yet." Maria turned to look at her friend and colleague. "Yuki, what would we have done if this happened before first contact? If we found a ship in distress somewhere in our own solar system?" Yuki didn't hesitate. "We would have helped them. Then why should we be any different now?" Maria stood up from her chair. "I don't care what the Torvac or anyone else says. I'm not going to sit here and watch someone die because the galaxy has decided they're not worth saving. That's not who we are." The crew exchanged glances. One by one, they nodded. Whatever the consequences, they would face them together. The Wandering Hope changed course and accelerated toward the dying ship. As they drew closer, Maria got her first real look at the HFY vessel. It was small, barely larger than a shuttle, with a design that looked organic rather than mechanical. The hull seemed to be made of something that resembled shell or bone, with patterns that might have been natural or might have been carved by careful hands. It was unlike anything humanity had ever built, and there was a strange beauty to it even in its damaged state. "I'm reading multiple hull breaches," David reported. "Whatever happened to this ship, it wasn't an accident. There are energy weapon marks all over the hull. Someone attacked them." Maria felt her stomach tighten. "Pirates? Maybe. Or maybe someone who shares the Torvak's opinion about the HFY and decided to do something about it." The thought made Maria angry in a way she couldn't quite explain. She had seen prejudice before, had grown up learning about the dark chapters of human history when people had been treated as less than human because of where they came from or how they looked. She had hoped that the galaxy would be different, that species who had traveled between stars for thousands of years would have moved past such primitive thinking. Apparently not. "Bring us alongside," she ordered. "I'm going over there." "Captain, I should go instead," Yuki said. "We don't know what condition that ship is in, or what we'll find inside. I'm not asking anyone to take a risk I'm not willing to take myself." Maria was already moving toward the door. "You have the bridge. Keep trying to hail those other ships. Let them know what we're doing. Maybe one of them will grow a conscience." She doubted it, but she had to try. Maria made her way to the airlock, where the ship's engineer, a big man named James Wright, was already preparing a portable atmosphere generator and medical kit. He had been listening to everything on the internal communications system. "I'm coming with you," he said. "You might need someone who knows how to patch a ship together." Maria didn't argue. Having James along would be useful, and she was grateful not to be doing this alone. They sealed themselves into their spacesuits and waited as the Wandering Hope matched velocities with the HFY vessel. The ships were close enough now that Maria could see the damage clearly through her helmet's visor. Whoever had attacked this little ship had not been gentle. Whole sections of the hull had been burned through, and there were scorch marks that suggested the attackers had kept firing long after the fight was over. This wasn't just violence, it was cruelty. The airlock sealed, and they crossed the small gap between ships. James worked quickly to override the emergency locks on the HFY vessel's door, and soon they were inside. The interior of the ship was dark, lit only by the weak glow of emergency lights that flickered every few seconds. The air was thin and cold, almost too cold to breathe, even through their suits' filters. Maria activated her helmet light and looked around. The inside of the ship was just as organic as the outside. The walls curved in smooth arcs, covered with the same shell-like material. There were no straight lines anywhere, no sharp angles. It felt less like being inside a machine and more like being inside a living creature. Strange objects hung from the walls, things that might have been tools or decorations or something else entirely. "Life signs are coming from further in," James said, checking his scanner. "This way." They moved through the ship carefully, stepping over debris and ducking under collapsed support beams. The damage inside was even worse than what they had seen from outside. Whatever had happened here, the single survivor was lucky to be alive at all. They found the HFY in what seemed to be the control room, curled into a tight ball in the corner. Maria's first thought was that the creature was already dead, but then she saw the faint movement of breathing. The HFY was smaller than she had expected, perhaps the size of a large dog. Its body was covered in soft, pale fur that might have been white or silver once, but was now matted with blood and soot. It had 4 limbs that ended in hands rather than paws, and a long tail that wrapped around its body protectively. Its face was partially hidden, but Maria could see large eyes that were closed, and delicate features that reminded her of something from Earth mythology, though she couldn't quite place what. "It's hurt badly," James said, kneeling beside the creature. "Multiple wounds, probably from the attack, and I'm reading signs of severe malnutrition and dehydration on top of that. This thing has been suffering for a long time, even before whoever did this came along." Maria knelt on the other side of the Vethkai, moving slowly and carefully. She didn't want to frighten it, assuming it was even conscious enough to be frightened. "Can we move it to our ship?" James considered the question. "I think so. It's fragile, but I don't see any injuries that would make transport dangerous. The bigger question is whether we can help it once we get it there. We don't know anything about Vethkai biology. Our medical systems aren't designed for alien species. We'll figure it out." Maria reached out and gently touched the creature's shoulder. "We have to try." At her touch, the Vethkai stirred. Its eyes opened slowly, revealing irises that were a deep, luminous purple. For a moment, it just stared at Maria, as if trying to understand what it was seeing. Then it spoke. The words were in a language Maria didn't understand, soft and musical, like someone singing under their breath. But the universal translator in her helmet caught up after a few seconds, turning the sounds into words she could comprehend. "You came," the Vethkai said. Its voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. "I called for help, and you came." "Of course we came," Maria said. "We heard your signal. We're here to help you." The Vethkai's eyes filled with something that looked like tears. "No one helps us. Not anymore. Why would you come?" It was such a simple question, but it hit Maria harder than she expected. How lonely must this creature be? How abandoned must its entire species feel for the simple act of responding to a distress signal to bring them to tears? "Because you needed help," Maria said. "That's all that matters." The Vethkai reached out with one trembling hand and touched Maria's arm. The contact seemed to take all the strength it had left, and its eyes began to close again. "I am called Whisper," it said softly. "I will remember this kindness. If I live, I will remember." Then it fell unconscious again. Maria and James exchanged looks. Whatever happened next, they had made their choice. They wrapped Whisper carefully in emergency blankets and carried the small alien back to the Wandering Hope. Back on the human ship, they set up a makeshift medical bay in one of the cargo holds. Maria had everyone who wasn't essential to flying the ship working on the problem of how to help a creature they knew nothing about. David searched through every database they had access to, looking for any information on Vethkai biology. Their ship's doctor, a woman named Elena Vasquez, did her best to treat the wounds she could see while being careful not to cause more harm. Hours passed. Whisper remained unconscious, breathing slowly but steadily. Maria stayed by the creature's side, watching over it, refusing to leave even when Yuki urged her to get some rest. "Why do you think everyone abandoned them?" Maria asked quietly. "An entire species declared outside the protection of rescue laws. What could they have done to deserve that?" Yuki sat down beside her captain. "I've been reading what little I can find. It's not much, but there are references to something that happened a long time ago, thousands of years before humans even existed. Something called the Cascade." "The Cascade?" "It's not clear what it was. Some kind of disaster that affected multiple systems. A lot of people died, and somehow the Vethkai were blamed for it." Yuki shook her head. "But that's all I can find. Whatever really happened has been buried or forgotten." Maria looked down at Whisper. The creature was so small, so fragile. It was hard to imagine it, or its people being responsible for something terrible enough to justify thousands of years of hatred and abandonment. Whatever happened back then, this creature wasn't part of it, Maria said. It's probably not even old enough to remember. And even if it was, that doesn't give anyone the right to leave it to die. Yuki nodded. I agree. But you should know that the other ships reported what we did. Word is spreading. There might be consequences. Maria knew Yuki was right. The galactic community had its own ideas about how things should work, and humans had just openly defied one of their oldest traditions. There would be questions, maybe punishments. But looking at Whisper, looking at the gentle rise and fall of the creature's chest as it slept, Maria couldn't bring herself to care. Some things were more important than following rules that were wrong from the start. Let them come, she said. We'll deal with whatever happens. But we're not abandoning this creature. Not now, not ever. Somewhere in the depths of space, a small ship with a human crew continued on its journey, carrying an alien that the rest of the galaxy had given up on. And though none of them knew it yet, that simple act of kindness was about to change everything. The Vethkai called Whisper had been saved by humans, and the universe would never be quite the same again. 3 days after the rescue, Whisper opened its eyes and spoke for the first time since being brought aboard the Wandering Hope. Maria was there when it happened, sitting in the chair she had barely left since they found the little alien. Water, Whisper said softly. Please? Maria reached for the container she had prepared, a simple bottle with a special attachment that would work for different mouth shapes. She had no idea if the Vethkai could drink water safely, but Elena had tested a small sample of Whisper's blood and found nothing that suggested water would be harmful. Whisper drank slowly, its purple eyes never leaving Maria's face. When the bottle was empty, the creature let out a small sigh and seemed to relax slightly. Thank you, Whisper said. I did not dream you. You are real. I'm real, Maria confirmed. You're on a human ship called the Wandering Hope. You're safe now. Whisper was quiet for a long moment. I have heard of humans, the new species, the ones who came from a small blue world far from everywhere else. Its voice was stronger now, though still weak. I did not know humans would be kind to us. No one is kind to us. Maria felt that same tightness in her chest that she had felt before. Can you tell me what happened to your ship? Who attacked you? Whisper's tail curled tighter around its body, a gesture that Maria had come to recognize as fear or distress. There is a group. They call themselves the Cleansing Fire. They believe that the galaxy will never be safe as long as any Vethkai still breathe. They hunt us. They have hunted us for a very long time. That's horrible, Maria said. Have you reported them to the Galactic Council? The look Whisper gave her was so sad that Maria wished she could take the question back. The Council does not care what happens to us, Whisper said quietly. We are outside the protection of their laws. If we are killed, it is not considered a crime. The Cleansing Fire operates openly because no one will stop them. Maria had known this on some level, had understood from what the Torvak captain told her that the Vethkai were considered acceptable targets. But hearing it confirmed by one of the victims was different. It made the injustice feel more real, more urgent. Why? She asked. What did your people do that the entire galaxy decided you don't deserve to live? Whisper was silent for so long that Maria thought perhaps the question had been too difficult, too painful. But finally, the alien spoke. Long ago, before any of the current council species had achieved space travel, my people were different. We had abilities that others did not understand. We could see things that had not happened yet, feel things that were far away, connect with others in ways that seemed like magic to those who could not do it. Whisper paused, gathering strength. We tried to use these abilities to help. When we sensed danger coming, we warned others. When we felt suffering, we tried to heal it. But our warnings were not always right. Our healing did not always work, and over time, the other species began to fear us. Maria nodded slowly. She could see how that might happen. Beings with strange powers making predictions that sometimes failed. It would be easy for fear and suspicion to grow. Then came the cascade. Whisper continued. A great disaster. Many worlds were damaged. Many lives were lost. And my people, we had sensed it coming. We tried to warn the others, but they did not listen. They thought we were trying to manipulate them, to gain power through fear. When the disaster happened anyway, they blamed us. They said we had caused it, that we had used our powers to bring destruction upon them. Did you? Maria asked. She had to know. Whisper's eyes met hers. No. The cascade was a natural event, something that happens in this part of the galaxy every few thousand years. We knew it was coming because we could feel the energy building. We tried everything we could to save as many as possible, but no one would believe us. And after, when they needed someone to blame, the alien's voice trailed off. Maria understood. It was a story she had heard before, in different forms. People were afraid of what they didn't understand. When something terrible happened, they looked for someone to blame. And once that blame took hold, it was almost impossible to shake loose, even after thousands of years. That's not fair, Maria said. No, Whisper agreed. But it is what happened. My people were driven from our homeworld. We were banned from most stations and colonies. We learned to live in the spaces between, always moving, always hiding. And over time, there were fewer and fewer of us. The hunts, the lack of resources, the simple exhaustion of living as outcasts for so long. We are dying, human. In another generation or two, there will be no Vethkai left at all. Maria felt something harden inside her. It was one thing to know that injustice existed in the universe. It was another to see it up close, to look into the eyes of someone who had been condemned to extinction simply because their ancestors had tried to help and been punished for it. Not if I can help it, she said. Before Whisper could respond, the ship's communication system crackled to life. It was Yuki's voice, and she sounded worried. Captain, we have a problem. A Galactic Council enforcement vessel just dropped out of hyperspace. They're demanding that we stop and prepare for boarding. Maria's jaw tightened. She had known this was coming. Word traveled fast in space, especially bad news. Stay here, she told Whisper. I'll handle this. She made her way to the bridge, where her crew was gathered around the main view screen. The council vessel was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the Wandering Hope. It bristled with weapons that could vaporize their little cargo ship in seconds. They're hailing us, David said. Put them through. The screen flickered, and a face appeared. It was a crystalline, one of the most ancient species in the galaxy. Their bodies were made of living mineral, and their faces were angular and hard, with eyes that glowed from within. This one's glow was a cold blue, a sign of disapproval. Human vessel Wandering Hope, the crystalline said. Its voice was like stones grinding together. You are charged with interfering in galactic affairs by providing aid to a member of a proscribed species. You will surrender the Vethkai to our custody immediately. Maria stepped forward. I'm Captain Maria Santos. The individual aboard my ship is a victim of violent crime. They were attacked and left to die. I will not surrender them to anyone until I'm sure they'll be safe. The crystalline's glow intensified. You do not seem to understand the situation, human. The Vethkai are outside the protection of galactic law. What happens to them is not a matter of justice or injustice. It simply is. By harboring one, you are violating the established order of this galaxy. An established order that allows genocide, Maria said flatly. An established order that says it's acceptable to hunt an entire species to extinction because of something that happened thousands of years before any of them were born. I'm sorry, but I can't accept that. Your acceptance is not required, only your compliance. Maria looked at her crew. Every one of them had come on this voyage knowing the risks. They were far from home, in a galaxy that suddenly seemed much more dangerous than they had imagined. The smart thing to do would be to hand over Whisper and apologize for the misunderstanding. But not one of them looked like they wanted to do that. James stepped forward. Captain, the Vethkai is awake and moving around now. It's been helping with some of the repairs. Never seen anyone understand ship systems so quickly. David nodded. And it's been teaching me about stellar navigation. Did you know they can sense magnetic fields? They used to guide ships through dangerous regions of space when other navigation systems failed. Elena spoke up next. I've been studying its biology. The Vethkai have an incredible immune system. Some of the compounds in their blood could potentially help treat diseases that have been plaguing human colonies for decades. And it's kind, Yuki added quietly. I talked to it last night. It asked about my family, my home. It wanted to know what Earth was like. No one who's that interested in other people could possibly be the monster the galaxy makes them out to be. Maria felt a swell of pride in her crew. They had made their choice, just as she had. You heard them, she said to the crystalline on the screen. We're not giving up our guest. If you want to take them, you'll have to go through us. The crystalline was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was colder than before. You are making a serious mistake, human. The galaxy does not look kindly on those who defy its traditions. There will be consequences. Then there will be consequences, but we won't be the ones who abandoned an innocent person to die. The communication ended. For a moment, no one on the bridge moved or spoke. Then the council vessel began to move, not toward them, but away, turning back toward the hyperspace lane it had come from. They're leaving, David said, surprised. They're actually leaving. Maria let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They probably don't want to start an incident by firing on a human ship. Not yet anyway. But they'll be back, or someone else will. We need to figure out our next move. We could go home, Yuki suggested. Back to human space. The council has less authority there. Maria nodded slowly. That's what I was thinking. But we should ask Whisper what they want. This is their life we're talking about. She went back to the cargo hold where Whisper was resting. The little alien was sitting up now, looking at a tablet that someone had given it. On the screen was a picture of Earth, the blue and white sphere that all humans carried in their hearts, no matter how far they traveled. It's beautiful, Whisper said when Maria entered. I have never seen a world like this. So much water, so much green. It's home, Maria said. She sat down beside the alien. We just had a conversation with the Galactic Council. They want us to give you up. Whisper's tail curled around its body. I heard. The walls are thin and my hearing is good. The alien looked at Maria with those deep purple eyes. You refused them. For me. Why? Because what they're doing to your people is wrong, and because you're my responsibility now. Maria paused. We're thinking about taking you back to human space. The council has less power there. You might be safer. Whisper was quiet, processing this. I have nowhere else to go. My people are scattered. I do not know if any of them still live. If you would truly take me to your world, I would be grateful beyond words. Then that's what we'll do. The journey back to human space took 2 weeks. During that time, Whisper grew stronger, both physically and emotionally. The little alien turned out to be a quick learner and an eager helper, throwing itself into the daily work of keeping the ship running with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone. But it was during the quiet moments that Whisper truly showed its nature. In the evenings when the crew gathered in the common room, Whisper would sit with them and listen to their stories. It wanted to know everything about humanity, about their history, their cultures, their hopes and fears, and in turn, it shared its own stories. Tales of the Vethkai when they were still a proud and numerous people, before the Cascade, before the exile. Maria learned that the Vethkai had once been artists and healers, known throughout the galaxy for their ability to sense what others needed and provide it. They had built floating cities that drifted between stars, places where any being could come for help and healing. They had been generous with their gifts, asking nothing in return, and that perhaps was why they had been targeted. In a galaxy built on trade and competition, beings who gave freely were seen as a threat to the established order. On the 12th day of the journey, something unexpected happened. David picked up a series of strange signals coming from a nearby asteroid field. "It's weak, but it's definitely a Vethkai transmission," he said. "There might be others out here." Whisper was at his side in an instant, its entire body trembling with hope. "Please," it said. "Please, we must find them. If there are others, I have to know." Maria didn't hesitate. "Change course. Let's see who's out there." They found them hidden in the hollowed-out core of a large asteroid. A small group of Vethkai, perhaps 20 in all, living in conditions that made the Wandering Hope look like a palace. They had been hiding here for years, afraid to move, afraid to broadcast, slowly running out of supplies and hope. When the human ship appeared, they were terrified at first. They had learned to fear every vessel that came near. But when Whisper's face appeared on their screens, when they heard its voice speaking their own language, the terror turned to tears of joy. "We thought we were alone," their leader said, an older Vethkai with silver fur and tired eyes. "We thought everyone else was gone." "Not anymore," Whisper said. "These humans came for me when no one else would. They are taking me to their world. They say we can be safe there." The older Vethkai looked at Maria with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Is this true, human? Would you truly welcome us?" Maria thought about all the things that could go wrong. She thought about the political complications, the questions from her own government, the possible reactions from the Galactic Council. She thought about the fact that she was a cargo ship captain, not a diplomat, and that she was making decisions that were far above her authority. Then she looked at the faces of the Vethkai, at their hope and their fear, and their desperate need for someone to show them kindness after thousands of years of cruelty. "Come with us," she said. "All of you. We have room." And so, the Wandering Hope continued its journey home, its hold now filled with refugees instead of cargo. 21 Vethkai who had believed they would die forgotten in the darkness between stars, now traveling toward a world that might actually welcome them. Maria didn't know what would happen when they reached Earth. She didn't know how humanity would react to these strange, gentle beings. She didn't know if she was doing the right thing or making a terrible mistake. But she knew she couldn't have done anything else. Some things were more important than following rules or playing it safe. Some things were about remembering who you were and what you believed in. Humanity had always been a species of rescuers and helpers. They had a long history of reaching out to those in need, even when it cost them something. That instinct had survived the journey to the stars. It would survive this test, too. At least, Maria hoped it would. The stars wheeled slowly past the viewports as the Wandering Hope carried its precious cargo home. And in the common room, a crew of humans and a group of Vethkai sat together, sharing food and stories and laughter, building the first bridges of a friendship that might just change the galaxy. The Wandering Hope entered Earth orbit 3 weeks after leaving the asteroid field. News of their unusual passengers had traveled ahead of them, spreading through human communication networks like wildfire. By the time they requested permission to land, it seemed like the entire planet was watching. Maria had expected arguments, resistance, maybe even orders to turn back. What she got instead was a message from the United Earth Council, the governing body that spoke for all of humanity's colonies and outposts. "Captain Santos," the message said, "you and your passengers are welcome home. Prepare for landing at Geneva Spaceport. A delegation is waiting to meet you." She didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. Probably both. The Vethkai were gathered in the common room, looking out the viewports at the blue and green world that was growing larger by the minute. Maria had never seen such wonder on anyone's face. They pressed close to the windows like children, pointing and murmuring to each other in their musical language. "It looks like a dream," Whisper said softly. The little alien had become something of a leader among the refugees, the one who spoke most often with the human crew. All those colors, all that life. How can one world hold so much? "Earth has always been good at surprising people," Maria said, "including us." The landing was smooth. When the cargo ramp lowered and the Vethkai got their first breath of real planetary air, several of them started to cry. They had lived so long in the sterile, recycled atmosphere of ships and stations that they had forgotten what a living world smelled like. The delegation waiting for them was larger than Maria had expected. There were politicians and scientists and medical specialists, but there were also ordinary people who had simply come to see the aliens for themselves. And unlike the reactions the Vethkai were used to receiving, there was no fear in these faces, only curiosity, only welcome. The leader of the delegation was a woman named President Chen, a small but commanding figure with gray hair and sharp eyes. She stepped forward and addressed the Vethkai directly. "On behalf of all humanity," she said, "I want to welcome you to Earth. Whatever has happened to your people in the past, whatever the rest of the galaxy thinks of you, you will find no such prejudice here. You are our guests, and you will be treated with the respect and dignity that all intelligent beings deserve." The older Vethkai, the one who had led the group in the asteroid field, stepped forward to respond. Her name was Bright Eye, and she had been chosen to speak for her people. "We have lived for thousands of years as outcasts," Bright Eye said. Her voice was steady, but there were tears on her fur. "We had given up hope that any other species would ever see us as anything but monsters. Your kindness overwhelms us. We do not know how to repay it." President Chen smiled. "You don't need to repay anything. You just need to be yourselves." The first few months were a time of adjustment for everyone. The Vethkai were given housing in a quiet community outside Geneva, a place where they could rest and recover while scientists and diplomats figured out the best way to integrate them into human society. Maria stayed close by. She had been offered a promotion, a bigger ship, a command position in Earth's growing space fleet. She turned them all down. Something about the Vethkai had touched her heart in a way she couldn't explain, and she wanted to see their story through to the end. And what a story it turned out to be. As the Vethkai grew stronger and more confident, they began to share their gifts with their human hosts. It turned out that the abilities that had once made them feared throughout the galaxy were exactly what humanity needed. Whisper had a talent for healing that bordered on the miraculous. The little alien could sense illness in a person's body just by being near them, could identify the source of pain, and suggest treatments that human doctors had never considered. Working alongside Elena and other medical researchers, Whisper helped develop new approaches to diseases that had plagued human colonies for generations. Bright Eye was a navigator without equal. Her ability to sense magnetic fields and energy patterns allowed her to chart safe courses through regions of space that humans had considered too dangerous to enter. Trade routes that would have taken years to map could now be completed in weeks with a Vethkai guide. Others had different talents. Some could predict solar flares and cosmic storms with enough accuracy to save lives and equipment. Some could communicate with alien species that humans had never been able to understand. Some simply had a gift for bringing peace to troubled minds, for sensing when someone was hurting and knowing exactly what to say. And they asked nothing in return. That was what amazed humanity most of all. The Vethkai helped because helping was in their nature. They gave because giving brought them joy. After thousands of years of being punished for that generosity, they had not lost it. They had kept it burning inside them like a flame that refused to die. Word of what was happening on Earth spread through the galaxy. At first, the other species reacted with alarm. The Torvak sent formal protests. The crystalline demanded explanations. There was talk of sanctions, of cutting off trade with human worlds until the Vethkai were expelled. But humanity refused to bend. The Vethkai are part of our community now, President Chen told the Galactic Council in a speech that was broadcast to every world with a receiving station. We will not abandon them because of superstitions and prejudices that have no basis in fact. The cascade happened thousands of years ago, and the Vethkai have been punished for it ever since. We believe that punishment has gone on long enough. We believe it is time for the galaxy to move forward. The council was furious, but they were also uncertain. Humanity was growing in power and influence with every passing year. The young species had established colonies on hundreds of worlds, had built trade networks that rivaled those of much older civilizations. They were not someone to be dismissed or ignored. And then something happened that changed everything. It started as a faint signal, detected by deep space monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. An energy buildup of massive proportions coming from the same region of space where the cascade had occurred so many millennia ago. The Vethkai felt it first. All of them, no matter where they were, suddenly became still and looked toward the stars with fear in their eyes. "It is happening again," Whisper told Maria. "The cascade. We can feel it building. In a few months, perhaps a year, it will release, and this time there are far more worlds in its path than there were before." Maria felt her blood run cold. "Can you stop it?" Whisper shook its head. "No one can stop a cosmic event of this magnitude, but we can warn people. We can help them prepare. We can guide ships to safety and shelter worlds that lie in the danger zone. That is what we tried to do last time. That is why we were blamed when our warnings were ignored." The news spread quickly. Scientists confirmed what the Vethkai sensed. Another cascade was coming, a massive release of cosmic energy that would sweep through a significant portion of the galaxy. Worlds that lay in its path would face devastating radiation. Catastrophic magnetic storms, perhaps worse. Millions of lives were at risk. And suddenly, the galaxy that had spent thousands of years persecuting the Vethkai found itself desperately in need of their help. The first to ask were the Torvak. The same species whose captain had warned Maria to abandon Whisper to its fate now came to Earth with humble requests for assistance. Their homeworld lay directly in the projected path of the cascade. Without warning and guidance, they would lose everything. Bright Eye could have refused. She could have reminded them of all the cruelty they had shown her people over the centuries. She could have let them face the same fate they had wished upon every Vethkai. But she didn't. "We will help," Bright Eye said. "That is what we do. That is who we are." The Vethkai scattered across the galaxy, each one becoming a beacon of hope for species that had once hunted them. They guided evacuation ships through safe corridors of space. They identified worlds that would provide shelter from the worst of the storm. They healed the sick and comforted the frightened, never asking for thanks or reward. Maria went with Whisper to a colony world near the edge of the danger zone. The colonists there were a mix of species, thousands of beings who had come together to build a life far from the crowded core worlds. Now they were facing the very real possibility that everything they had built would be destroyed. Whisper worked without rest for days, mapping the energy patterns of the approaching cascade, finding the precise timing and angles that would allow the colony to survive. The little alien pushed itself to the very edge of exhaustion, driven by a sense of purpose that Maria had never seen in anyone before. "Why?" Maria asked during one of the few breaks she could convince Whisper to take. "After everything they did to your people, why are you willing to give so much to help them?" Whisper looked at her with those deep purple eyes. "Because kindness is not a trade. You do not only help those who have helped you, you help because helping is right. You help because, in the end, we are all travelers in the same universe, all facing the same darkness. And the only thing that makes the journey bearable is knowing that someone else might reach out to catch us when we fall." The alien paused, then continued. "You taught me that, Maria. When you came for me in that dying ship, when you could have turned away like everyone else. You did not ask what I could give you. You did not calculate whether I was worth saving. You simply saw someone who needed help, and you helped. That is the most powerful thing I have ever seen anyone do." Maria felt tears in her eyes. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Whisper said gently. "You did what anyone should do. That is different. And that difference is everything." The cascade came 6 months later. It was as terrible as the Vethkai had predicted, a wave of cosmic energy that swept across hundreds of star systems. Worlds that lay in its direct path were battered by radiation and storms. Ships caught in the open were torn apart. But the death toll was a fraction of what it could have been. Thanks to the warnings and guidance of the Vethkai, most of the beings in the affected region had been evacuated or protected. Colonies that would have been wiped out survived behind shields designed using Vethkai knowledge. Ships that would have been lost found safe harbor in places the Vethkai had identified. When the storm finally passed, the galaxy was changed. The Galactic Council held a special session. Representatives from every member species were present, including humanity, who had been granted full membership status in recognition of their role in the crisis. And at the center of the chamber, for the first time in thousands of years, stood a Vethkai. Whisper had been chosen to speak for its people. The little alien stood before beings who had once considered it acceptable to hunt and kill its kind, and it spoke without fear or anger. "We are not asking for apologies," Whisper said. "The past cannot be changed. We are not asking for compensation for what was taken from us. What was lost cannot be returned. We are only asking for the chance to be part of this community again, to help, as we have always wanted to help, to share our gifts and receive the gifts of others, to live in the light instead of hiding in the shadows." There was a long silence. Then the crystalline representative, the same species that had once demanded Maria surrender Whisper to their custody, rose to speak. "For thousands of years, we believed the Vethkai were our enemies. We believed that by driving them out, we were protecting ourselves. We were wrong." The words seemed to cost the crystalline something to say. "The Vethkai have saved millions of lives in the past months. They have given freely to species that gave them nothing but hatred. They have shown us what true courage and true generosity look like. We move that the prescription against the Vethkai be lifted immediately and that they be welcomed back into the galactic community with full rights and protections." The motion passed unanimously. On Earth, Maria watched the broadcast with Bright Eye and the other Vethkai refugees who had stayed behind. When the vote was announced, there was no celebration, no triumphant cheering, only quiet tears and the gentle touching of hands and faces, as beings who had spent their lives as outcasts finally allowed themselves to believe that they belonged somewhere. "What will you do now?" Maria asked Bright Eye. "Your people can go anywhere, do anything. You don't have to hide anymore." Bright Eye looked around at the community they had built, at the human friends who had become family over the past year. "Some of us will go out into the galaxy," she said. We have much to do, many to help. But some of us will stay here if you will have us. Earth is the first place that ever welcomed us. We would like it to remain our home." Maria smiled. "You'll always be welcome here. Always." Months later, a monument was erected in Geneva, at the site where the Vethkai refugees had first set foot on Earth. It showed a human hand reaching out to grasp an alien one, two different beings choosing connection over fear. The inscription at the base read simply, "To those who help when no one else will. May we always be such people." Maria visited the monument often. Sometimes Whisper would join her, and they would sit together in the shadow of the statue, watching the sun set over the mountains and talking about everything and nothing. "I have been thinking," Whisper said one evening, "about what makes humans different. You are not the strongest species in the galaxy, not the smartest or the oldest or the most advanced, but there is something in you that the others lack, a stubbornness about right and wrong, a refusal to accept that cruelty is simply how things have to be." Maria considered this. "I think we just had a lot of practice," she said. "Our own history is full of times when we hurt each other, when we treated people as less than human. But we also had people who stood up against that, who said, 'This is wrong, and I won't be part of it.' Maybe that's what we learned to carry with us to the stars." Whisper nodded slowly. "Perhaps that is it. Perhaps compassion is a muscle, and you have been exercising it for a very long time." The alien looked up at the monument, at the joined hands reaching toward the sky. "I am glad you found us, Maria. I am glad you did not turn away." "So am I," Maria said. They sat together as the stars came out, human and alien, two small beings in an infinite universe. And somewhere out there, other ships with other crews were making the same choice Maria had made, reaching out to those in need, refusing to accept that anyone was beyond saving. The galaxy was changing. Slowly, yes, and with many setbacks still to come, but changing nonetheless. And at the heart of that change was a simple idea that humanity had carried with them from their small blue world. Everyone deserves kindness. Everyone deserves a chance. And sometimes, the smallest act of compassion can move the stars themselves. The Vethkai had been abandoned by the galaxy, but the humans had come for them anyway, and in doing so, they had reminded everyone what it truly meant to be civilized. Not power, not technology, not the accumulation of worlds and wealth. Just a hand, reaching out in the darkness, offering help to those who had lost all hope. That was what mattered. That was what would always matter. And as long as there were beings willing to reach out, the universe would never be truly dark.